So last year we did a panel. It was in the big panel room on Thursday, and now it's like the inverse, end of the con almost, and we're in this small room. It's not that small.
Pretty big.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
It's just there. This is about Eastern Trails and everything great about Falcom. Let's get into some introductions.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
I am OMG Floofy. I am the administrator for the website Endless History. I have been involved in translating interviews and so forth from Toshihiro Kondo, Falcom's president, as well as doing things such as translating the financial data. Translating the financial data from Falcom, like their yearly end-of-year reports, and I do live tweet feeds of their shareholder meeting every year. So.
All right.
I'm Rebels. I created the Falcon Discord and I help out with the fan translation now. As you see, as proofreading mostly in QA and tasks, basically keeping the project going in certain ways. I don't know. Why am I giving you that? You get your own.
Late night.
I am Zerker, and I am the lead editor on the Trails from Zero fan localization project.
Okay. I'm Bumpmaster. I'm pretty active in the community, and I was the one who provided all these games. I'm a pretty big collector.
Yep. I'm Pasicone Deacon. I help out with the Falcom Music Room YouTube channel to a certain extent. I've done a lot of Falcom history, digging, music archival, cracking my throat. And I do, I just kind of did like a generalist. I'm really interested in Falcom and everything about them, not just Eastern Trails. Really good company. And I guess that's on to the next slide.
Yep.
Because we get to talk about what is Falcom. I think you all have an idea of what Falcom is. You all have played their games, at least one of them. You're here because they are a really unique studio. They have so much history behind them. They are not indie, but they have a kind of homegrown studio mentality. They haven't blossomed into a larger developer, the likes of which we might say Level 5 became a really big general RPG studio, whereas Falcom's kind of stayed low. They don't recruit many developers. They go for quality over quantity. They have tropes that they use over and over again, but they vary them in meaningful ways. And they just make really great feeling games. They're wonderful to get into. There's a lot of diversity to them. Even quite recently, they've been exceeding the quality standards and achieving things that the studio with only maybe 55-ish developers, not developers, more like 40, can do with a limited budget.
Well, I mean, I think the total, like, if you guys have played Ys 8, Ys 8 had, I think, 3 programmers on it.
Yeah. You can see some little slides right there just showing what they've done recently. The top right slide is from Zwei, the RJS adventure. That's from 2001. That's arguably where modern Falcom kind of begins. It builds off of various classic Falcom games that builds, to kind of puts it all together, and then they said, where can we go from there? And then at the bottom right, you see what they've gone. They've gone to fully featured, 100 hours long RPGs that seem to defy some people would say some people would say they don't attention spans, but we know that's not the case. They're really engrossing games. That's Mishi, Bitterfeld, current mascot. I do not have a Mishi head. If I had a Mishi head, I'd wear it right now.
Mishi!
But it'd be really awful for my head too. I don't want to sweat that much. All right. This is just a general glimpse of major dates in their history. You see, in 1981, they started off as a computer shop. They weren't always a developer. Back in the early 1980s, in the late 1970s, Japanese console developers were not really a thing. Japanese arcade developers were still pretty new. Even newer were Japanese PC game developers, as in you'd have one programmer doing everything. But back in the day, you'd have computer shops, where Japanese made and designed microcomputers were sold, along with the peripherals and all that. And then Falcom was one of those shops. All these shops kind of, recruited regulars who would come to the shop to play around the computers to just make games and other things. Real brief.
Yeah, just real quick, the Ys books 1 and 2 for PC Engine, was that like 94? I seem to remember it was like older, like maybe 91, was it?
That's our bad. 1994, that's 1993 is when we had Ys 4 Dawn of Ys.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That came
Yeah.
out also.
Yeah, please correct us on this timeline. We can't get it right.
It's a lot to keep up with.
I remember
Yeah.
like drooling over that like EGM review back in the day. They were like raving about the music, and I'm like, I'll get one of these.
Yeah.
That's a lot of use, okay.
We'll return to this. It's kind of helpful, at least. That's a good sound to hear.
Yes, that sound is from a Falcom game, but that's not intended.
Whatever that was, it set off both of us.
Okay.
Right? You want to just jump to the next one?
Yeah.
All right.
It was one.
A wide-eyed, curious young man with fiery red hair. His name, next slide, is Al Clifton. He can't get it right. He just misspells it all the time. It's on all the different journals. There's a different spelling each time.
He just decided not to correct people anymore.
We just call him Adol, Adol, Adol. We don't even know.
Oh yeah, remember when it was Adele?
This is the E series. It's the most. It's not necessarily the most accessible Falcom series, but it's the one that really kind of made it big outside of Japan first. Not just in the Western world, which is wide and encompassing, but also in Taiwan, Korea, China. These games were easy to find on various home computers and then consoles when they got ported.
So, this one. Cool.
Next slide. And of course, we had the wall crusher himself. Go back. You see there's some evolution going across time. We have, for example, Ys 1 and 2. They're very simple, kind of top-down, adventure-like combat games. They're action RPGs where you would go across, in this case, the land of Hysteria and Ys. Very, very, not so much simplistic, but simple to the point and really fast. Just speedy. There's great pacing. There's a ton going on, but it's never too much and it's never too little. Then you get to something like Ys 8. You see Al is shipwrecked again. And he's looking at a big tree. There's more to this island he's shipwrecked on than at first it might seem. Over time, he has to rescue stowaways, castaways who have survived the shipwreck, piece together a new adventuring party that can actually figure out the mysteries of the island. And then there is, in the subtitle of the game, Ys 8, the Lacrimosa of Donna. So now we have two protagonists, and they both have really interesting kind of sides of the story around this island that they have to explore. Kind of the big thing behind Ys in general is legend. What happened back all those many years ago that has attracted Adol or some other adventurers, in the case of Ys Origin, to have to deal with a problem. There's crazy boss fights. That's Ys Origin, bottom left. That's a later boss fight, and that's not Adol, that's Hugo. That's a game that kind of stands as the exception. Most Ys games do just star Adol, but that one doesn't. It's before Adol's time, but it matters to Adol, in a sense. Yeah. Oh, you pointing something?
There's a little thing that was interesting about Ys Origin when it released in Japan. Ys Origin actually got anger from the Japanese fans because Adol was not in it. So if you've played Ys Origin on Steam, you've noticed that there's the additional mode where you can play Adol as an in-time attack. That was actually released as a bonus disc for the game originally. And it was free, all you had to do was pay for the shipping. And it basically just got added in eventually, I think, in future editions.
We have our second Falcom cosplayer.
Yep.
The entire event.
You're gonna make
Man.
Zerker's night.
Yeah, everyone look. No, I'm sorry. Just everyone don't
Let's not
make
get
this
too off
bad.
track. Point is, it's Ys. It's great. What's the next slide? So, as mentioned before, Ys Book 1 and 2 was a major release for the PC Engine when it came over here as the TurboGrafx 16 CD. It was not big. It wasn't big just because it was a Falcom game. It was big because it was kind of exposing a whole new generation, a whole generation of game players to not so much laughs, but great music, great voice acting, especially for the time. The feeling of a really high budget production, which is kind of odd because Falcom does not have a high budget. Hudson Soft did, and NEC did because they wanted the most for the English release of this game. This was a really auspicious kind of introduction for many people to Ys, and for a game series that was different from Zelda, but not too different. You know, you can kind of see the similarities, but also how it differed in really cool ways. On the right, we have an image of the general map of the Ys world, and I'll defer to Floofy for this.
One of the interesting things is whenever people think about games with a very in-depth lore and story, a lot of people from Falcom, they immediately think of the Trails series for obvious reasons because of its really hefty story. However, underneath all of the gameplay and action and rocking music of the Ys series, the Ys series itself has an intense lore to it as well. One of the most interesting things is that Ys is actually built on a lot of our legends. I mean, you can see it's clearly based off of our own version of Europe. It's a very fictional version of Europe. I mean, you see Gallia, which is basically Gaul. You have Ispati, which is Spain. Garmon is Germany. The Orietta is like the Indian, like India and so forth, and that sort of thing. One of the interesting things about Ys is underneath all of these games is an actual crazy intricate timeline of the history of the world that Falcom has been building through the games. And when they finally released Ys 6, they actually put in this one piece of information in that suddenly put all the games into one single piece of lore that are no longer broken into them, that they are suddenly all interconnected and interwoven, telling stories about ancient civilizations and so forth. One of the things that really excites me, though, is that the title Ys itself comes from a Breton legend, one of the great Atlantis-type stories. Off of the coast of Brittany, there was a legendary city of Ys in the ocean. And it was, King Bradlon put it together. And there's two different versions of the legend. One said that he put it to get away from the boom of Christianity on the mainland. Another one said that he made it to be a kingdom of Christianity, to show that he has converted to Christianity.
Christianity.
And so what was really cool about it is there's like this main pivotal character is a man in red who showed up one night. And his actions were the actions that actually doomed the city and sink it. Because he was there it was either one, he was working for the church to basically destroy this big pagan place of fantasy and so forth, or he was punished. He was trying to punish the king for making this place. And it's interesting that you have these two different legends based on who it comes from. But it's actually so much of the Ys series is actually built off of rich, real legends. They've referenced the. Has anybody here finished Memories of Celceta? Remember the Akashic Records at the end? That is actually a Hindu myth. And it's actually what they had it in the Hindu myth as the Akashic Records.
Excellent. So they just announced a new Ys game. It's that time of the year. And they announced this Falcom announced this during their recent shareholder meeting. It was kind of a big build-up to this announcement. They posted on their own website a teaser countdown with a very mysterious image. It didn't look like anything people normally associate with Ys.
Yeah, it's their background on the.
But it turned out to be Ys anyway. It's not looking like a really normal Ys game the way people have in people like, I guess, a lot of journalists or enthusiasts might have had in their heads. Not a bad thing. This Ys game, let me just get the quick little details. It's called Monstrum Nox stands for Monsters Night, roughly. It's weird Latin. It doesn't really work. That's a running theme. Lacrimosa of Donna doesn't make much sense either. It's set after Ys 7. This is the farthest game in the chronology. This is an older adult. And adult is supposed to be a lead character. He's supposed to be at the forefront. But they didn't show him in any of the press release materials that he was at the forefront. You don't know his design at all.
Interestingly enough, in the press release, it straight up says, what about the red-haired adventurer Adol Kristen? So they're straight up throwing in the question, what's up with him? Where is he?
Right. And so this builds off of Ys 8 but it differs in some interesting ways. The party characters that you now control have special abilities they can use for movement and for solving puzzles. This is kind of a return to Memories of Celceta. You also have an expansion of what was the Castaway Village in Ys 8. It's now guild operations in Ys 9. The setting is a prison city, it's an urban area, and the characters we've seen presumably have some big tie to it. They're seen exploring dungeons, and can I expand this? Might take a while to upload. No, it's not good anymore. But right there we have, just in the most vague way possible, we see some of the characters you can play as. They're not necessarily human. They are human, and yet they're not. We have a darker tone going on. People thought, based on the teaser image, this might be like Xanadu Next, but it's not. I find it a little interesting to think about. One common criticism I see of Ys 8 is that it's iterative. It's too much like previous Ys games on PSP or PS Vita. But this is clearly different. And the common criticism of Falcom I see sometimes on the internet, because it's the internet, you gotta have weird criticisms, is that Falcom is just going through the motions. They're not trying new things. Well, this looks like a very new Ys game to me. Some other tidbits. You can move and you can climb onto and move across rooftops. There is parkour. There's flying.
There's a wall running, shadow walking, from what we've heard. So lots of interesting traversal things to it. I do want to make a note, though, that there is the possibility that they may be leading us in one direction through our perspective. If you've followed Falcom long enough, you know that they have a tendency to try to mislead you and misguide you on the way you look at things. One of the early arts for Ys 8 was actually in this kind of style, of a silhouette who turned out to be Adol in a dark forest with this strange creature bearing over him and out of the mist. So, and if you played Ys 8, you'd probably recognize what that was with the big.
One of the dinos in a misty
forest area. Probably ran into it and got yourself surprised by it.
Don't trust everything Falcom throws at you. Play the games. That's the only real lesson. Big move.
Okay. So, we're bringing up a name of a character named Mishal. Who is this Mishal?
And why is Adol shipwrecked again?
Well, Mishal is a character that's going to be in our next section, as a character part of our next section. He is, if you've ever heard the phrase, a wizard did it, Mishal's the wizard. So we are jumping in. We're going to start leading into Trails in the Sky by talking about what led ahead of Trails in the Sky, by talking about Falcom's incredible Gagharv trilogy.
Yeah.
The Gagharv trilogy is made up of 3 games listed here. White Witch being the first of the trilogy. Most people have seen, who have played them in English from Bandai Namco. And there are these 3 games right here on the PSP that are right in front of Zerker. Ta-da! Unfortunately, the problem is that they were very, very badly translated, and the original game engine was completely removed from them, turning them into a turn-based engine.
Bandai Namco also misnumbered the releases on PSP in the West.
Yep. They released the second game first, the first game second, and then the third game third. However, what's actually kind of neat.
2, 1, 3.
Yeah.
What's actually kind of
That's
neat
right.
about Gagharv is that you can actually flip the first 2 games if you want. It's actually preferable to play them in order. You'll get more enjoyment out of the second game if you played the first one in that order. But you cannot, in absolutely any sense of the word, ever play the third game before the other 2. Because that third game is incredibly pivotal on what happens in the first 2.
They got that right. Yep.
Oh, did somebody start with 3?
That's about all you can give them.
So, I mentioned that they changed the combat engine. So what I'm going to do is I've actually got a sample of the engine with me. So you can see kind of what the original game was like. That's the wrong thing. Unfortunately, I have to run it through VMware.
Hey, look, it's Windows 98.
It's Windows 98.
You have to keep in mind, Falcom did make these
I'm
classic
sorry,
games for Windows.
And I apologize that it's very small. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah, me too.
So,
Gotta hear this song.
We're gonna see if we can get into a fight right away. There should be one like right in here. There we go. Now, notice here, I am not touching the keyboard. The game is built in an RTS type system. If you don't do anything, the characters do their automatic commands and they follow their AI. And I mean, Douglas is obviously kicking ass right now. I may not, so what you just heard me do is and good job, Adam, you have dodged the hit. So I've just triggered in to actually call in a command and bring in my healer and have her start healing. Anytime I do in a command, it will actually interrupt what's happening live with the game. So we're just going to go punch something really hard. Except Douglas is going to beat him to it. Except some healing went off. Oh, you're such a kill stealer. I was going to show off a move, but you got to get the idea is that instead of turn-based, this game actually functions with a weird RTS type thing that's happening.
It's like a hybrid thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if all your battles in your dungeon crawler started off with you auto-battling, but you can just call in an action whenever you need to.
Hi, random person I'm not going to talk to.
This is 640 by 480, I believe, the
Yeah.
resolution. And that's interesting. This game was made for PC98, which is a Japanese-only brand of computer. And it ran at
And I've
640
lost
by
force.
400. So the graphics are point by point. It's totally designed for that resolution.
Nobody wants to fight you. What are you talking about?
Nobody wants to fight me. What's up with this?
They ruined our demo. The AI has ruined our demo.
They're scared. There's almost always a fight, like right here too. What on earth? I'm just trying to show how they do.
They just aren't feeling it today.
The forest really is scared of Avid and company right now. I never have this kind of luck playing the game.
Here's a nice looking area, and here's some music.
All right. I guess we're not going to show a cool cut-in. We're going to reload that and get that fight back up. And maybe Douglas won't actually do the kill steal.
Typical Douglas.
There we go. By the way, to give an idea of something about with Kiseki, if you look down here at the bottom underneath everybody's HP, there's a bar called AT. This is the origin of the AT bar from the Kiseki games, from the Trails games. And unlike Kiseki or Trails, it's where it's on the side on its own for the whole field. Every individual character has their own AT bar. And in this case, it's more like CT from Final Fantasy Tactics if you're familiar with it, where every character has a countdown until they get their next turn. So we're gonna let them all get into place.
I'm gonna need more water.
It's pretty typical of Falcom. They like to get their systems in place that they like and just continually build on them throughout the games.
This was released at a time, this is a remake of the PC98 original. It was released at a time when Falcom was bringing over their really well-selling PC games to Windows.
Now here we go. Basically, special moves will then cut in like that. Another fun thing with this combat engine is sometimes enemies on the field will be like, I don't want that, I'm going this way. And they have like this little scared reaction over their head. Or some of them can be like, oh, I don't know what's happening here, and they have a question mark over their head.
I feel like that gives a pretty good idea of
Yeah,
the really unique thing that
Let me get out of
Gagharv
this.
brought over.
Minimize it first.
that's what I'm trying to do. There we go. Alrighty.
Gagharv also has really detailed NPCs, really interesting characters. And the whole world that's fully fleshed out and developed, it has its own Bible of sorts. And that kind of set the foundation, not just for Trails, but for Falcom games coming forward in general.
Okay.
Which brings us to...
Yeah, so I know there were like Saturn, of course the PSP, like PlayStation 1 ports of all the Gagharv games. Like, aside from maybe the PC98 and the Windows, what's probably the best?
I think it's almost believed to be the Windows versions. The Windows versions usually have the slight updates. I mean, I've not actually played the ports personally. In fact, I tried playing the PSP ones originally. I couldn't actually, I was like, I heard so many great things about the engine that I was just like, I can't do a point and click of this, a turn-based. And then there's also the translation. What was it? I didn't have much eaten today.
I didn't have eaten a unusual today.
I didn't have eaten a unusual today.
That's the famous one. It's even on like Clyde Malin's book about like
Yeah.
bad translations.
So we're going to go ahead and jump over to our next topic of the Kiseki series, the Liberal Arc.
Alright, so the Liberal Arc is the predecessor, or is the successor to Gagharv, and there's a lot of similarities if you've played both games. Yeah, and the first game is called Trails in the Sky, and it follows a journey-like adventure following Estelle and Joshua as they start out as junior bracers and how they develop and grow throughout the whole thing. Visit different towns, just NPCs full of stories and wonderful text. And FC is kind of like a Pokemon game, kind of like you start out and you go around everywhere, and it's kind of like a build-up for SC. SC is the second game. That's where a lot of important plot events happen, and third is just kind of its own thing.
Third is the party animal. He's,
It features a different protagonist, and it's a different kind of world. I don't want to spoil too much if you haven't played it, but
Second chapter is like the life of the party, and then third is like the after party.
The answer from Persona 3, yes. But yes, it's better, better.
but it's a wonderful experience. Experience
I don't know.
so many different types of characters, different factions like the Church, the Bracer Guild, and just everything is intertwined. Let's see.
you know what that
Okay.
is. I guess, yeah.
And just great world building. One of the best games we have ever seen in terms of world building and things connecting everywhere.
And it definitely does a good job of building the world for the games to come, because we got like so many more games in the Kiseki series coming forth, and all of it finds its place in first chapter, second chapter, because it all sets it up. Like even plot points that come back like 7 games later.
Well, funny enough, with the mentioning of third, we actually have things that came up in third that are still yet to be resolved. And I mean, even stuff in third is one of those, what's neat about it being, thankfully, it's kind of a very different sort of game. It's not as involved as first chapter and second chapter, but what makes it neat is it's actually easy to run through it real quickly. And as a result, one of the big treats of it is to, after you've played a new Kiseki game, go back to third and play it again. And see how much your whole worldview has expanded just from one game. And you're like, oh crap, that's what they're talking about here.
Yeah, they do a terrific job and a terrible job of consistency, like between everything and anything that you wouldn't expect or think of until you've seen it in another game.
And just one of the things that is unlike most other RPGs is NPCs. They're given a huge importance in these games, and you can talk to them, and then they'll have their own little stories you can fill out as you progress through the game and events. It's unlike most anything you've ever seen.
Yeah, that's one of the big things, is that pretty much after any like major minor story event, like dialogue's gonna change, and that's why these scripts are just massive.
And it's not just that they change, it's that they change it in a like progression of that character's story. They don't just change into another like variant of the same thing.
Yeah.
Welcome to Canaria. I like swords.
Yep. You might get that line every now and then. Welcome to Bose. It's a great Jade City, but then that character will actually have real things to say. Let us not forget, on a tangential note, the struggle of getting these games localized. It took forever and an age for us to get these in English.
Yeah, just these three.
I think we actually got first chapter what in 2011.
Right.
The game came out in Japan in 2004. To give an idea of the difference of time. And originally, I remember before Xseed had their partnership at one point. I know somebody who went out and just emailed random localizers, NISA, Xseed, Axis, and it was just like, can you translate these? They're on PSP now. And Ken from Xseed actually responded to him saying, we can't touch those, that would bankrupt us.
On a melancholy note, it almost did.
It almost did.
Until PC came around in 2014, the Shows in the Sky FC came out and sold really well. It's still kind of the big standard bearer for sales in the whole series. Cold Steel's catching up. We have more games to talk about. I wonder what those could be.
I wonder.
Lloyd Banks is in real trouble. He needs your help to save Crossbell and protect his smile. To do this, he's gonna need a few tonfas, an evenly cut 3 quarts, and plenty of evasion stacking armor. All he needs from you is your credit card number, 3 digits on the back, and the expiration month and year. But you gotta have to stop holding back and be quick about it before Aaron Hood wipes out the party on Nightmare. Also, Quasi is Vesper. Now, go. Get that barrier. Go, gamers!
Okay, this is gonna be me gushing about the Crossbell arc for a bit. This is the second
Closer
arc.
to your mic, please.
Okay, sorry. This is the second arc of the game, and this takes place in an autonomous state known as Crossbell, and it is between the Republic of Calvard and the Imperial Erebonia, which takes place in.
Both introduced in Sky, of course.
Yes, and this is all kind of north of Liberal. And the thing that is so interesting about Crossbell is probably its setting, and I'll get to its cast, but the setting, you have this autonomous state, and politics are a big part of it, and they can't really make any decisions for themselves because they're constantly going back and forth between these two countries, and corruption is easily just spreading through. You have mafias in this game. That's awesome. And so corruption is a huge part and theme of these games, and what's more appropriate than your main cast being a squad from the police department? They're a newfound squad. There you have the Bracer Guild in Sky, of course, which I'm sure most of you know. So essentially in Crossbell, you have a few people in the police, and they're like, hey, you know what? Everyone hates us because, you know, we aren't that good, but everyone loves this Bracer Guild. What's up with that? So they were like, what if we just take everything they do and just put it in our squad? And then so that's pretty much how you get the special support section, which consists of Lloyd Bannings, Ellie McDowell, Tio Plato, and Randy Orlando, as you can see there.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Right. It's at Randy's S-Craft. He's killing it.
Yeah, and so Zero basically starts out, this team is essentially born just to sort of win a popularity contest with the citizenry, because everyone loves the Bracers and hates the police. So that's pretty much how they form, and essentially they continue to grow throughout the games, definitely overshadowing what they were initially meant to be. And one of the great things about this game is that it all takes place pretty much in one massive city, Crossbell City, in the middle, in the heart of Crossbell State. And this is directly opposed to the rural landscape of Liberal, which has multiple cities throughout. But no, in Crossbell, you got Crossbell City, and you're there to protect Crossbell City.
I mean, you got little towns on the side.
Okay, you got little towns, but for the most part, you're going to be spending your time in Crossbell City.
Also, I want to chime in and say, remember that NPC thing we talked about? Throughout, remember, in Crossbell, you have access to almost every single NPC at one time.
Oh, wow.
That same NPC rule applies in Zero no Kiseki and Zero and Out. So that kind of gives you the idea of the scope of these games.
And one other thing I'd like to harp on, it's one of the things I personally really enjoy about this particular arc, is that I think there's a giant emphasis on the themes present in this game, and the main one being getting over the barrier. That's what the battle theme is called, and I love that they decided to call it that, and it's referenced throughout the games and the game's story. And pretty much getting over the barrier consists of many forms presented in each of the main characters' lives, and it's all about them coming together and overcoming whatever in their way, and I just think that's what makes this arc so compelling.
It's because you have basically a group of greenhorns having to take charge.
Oh yeah, and in case anyone doesn't know, Zero is the first game and Azure is the second one.
Yes.
And all in Japanese.
Oh, in this sense, you could say the Crossbell arc is the John Cena of the Trail series. So, he gets over the barriers. All right.
All right.
Oh my
That brings
God.
us to the next and currently recently finished arc.
So the Erebonia arc is the other part that is most partially released here in English, known as Trails of Cold Steel. That's Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. And this follows the formation of the of Class 7 at Thor's Military Academy. And it goes into a lot of the political mechanisms that are going on in Erebonia. And what's interesting about the Erebonia arc is that the first two games are actually running side by side with Zero no Kiseki and Ao no Kiseki. So while you have problems starting to come apart and just like stuff between the nobles and the commoners throughout Erebonia, you also have all this trouble happening in Crossbell. And of course, in a sense, you know they're going to all be connected eventually. But it's kind of what I found interesting about the Cold Steel games is that they're very much, over the course of the 4 games, don't worry, I'm not spoiling 3 and 4. Over the course of the 4 games, they tell a story of primarily Reen Schwarzer and his classmates, but Reen, you get to see Reen grow up throughout his school life and eventually his life beyond school in 3 and 4. I know a common question from people is, where's Cold Steel 3? Where is it? Especially because Cold Steel 4 just came out in Japan and finally closed off this arc. As something to make note about with Xseed Games and Cold Steel and the Cold Steel series, Xseed actually worked on the first Cold Steel for 1.5 years before they actually announced it. They actually got the game within months of its release, of the first game's release. And so they were given the rights for both games right after its first title's release. And basically, finally got it out just a little over 2 years later. The biggest thing to remind people is that the first Cold Steel is actually one of the shortest games of the entire Kiseki series.
Well, besides the third.
Besides the third. Third is insanely short. In fact, third's side quests are actually longer than the main scenario.
Of the third.
Yeah, that's what I meant with third. But anyway, Cold Steel 3, though, on the other hand, happens to be a larger game. In fact, it's not only a larger game, it is the biggest game of the Kiseki series. Most people I've known, I think I've only known a handful that have not been able to complete it in under 100 hours. I actually did not complete everything in the game, and I think it took me just over 120. And then when Falcom released their press release about Cold Steel 4, they're like, by the way, this is a bigger game.
And we don't really know exactly.
We don't know.
But we know it's about as big.
And we know it's at least as big because,
I mean, it could be small.
well, the main scenario is definitely shorter than Cold Steel 3's. But Cold Steel 4 basically is just like, go into the world, have fun, bring back souvenirs, save the world, that sort of thing. So these are two, basically, Xseed or whoever else ends up localizing these games has this gigantic problem ahead of them with the fact that these are just probably two of the largest games, or two
largest game scripts.
Period. They are monster.
It's a massive undertaking.
And they are incredible games, so definitely look forward to them. But to give some positivity on this, Falcom's president, Toshihiro Kondo, in a shareholder meeting straight up said the reason they moved them to PS4 is so that they could localize them easier. So, It is pretty much a matter, and I'm quite sure we're going to be in a situation with like the original Cold Steel. As soon as 3 came out, Falcom probably went straight to somebody like, you're releasing this or we're giving it to someone else. So it is most likely being worked on. Just, they can't really talk about it at this stage, obviously, because there's nothing to show most likely. And just basically give it a bit of time and we'll probably hear about it.
This is like having 5 worn pieces all consecutively across the course of the series. The text is just that large, and you need proper editing and time. You need proper translation, good time editing.
Consistency.
Right.
Consistency is absolutely key in this.
And also, just a side note, Floofy mentioned that 1 and 2 coincide with 0 and Azure. Just quick, who has played Cold Steel 2? Okay, well, fun fact, the entirety of Cold Steel 2 takes place during the finale of Azure.
I kind of figured just with...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
What is going on in Crossbell?
Look over there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I was trying to find like more and more like what is going on in Crossbell like images, but I couldn't find like
that entire cutscene was like, hey, go play these 2 other games.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Cold Steel 2 is a glorified advertisement for Crossbell.
Yeah. Oh man.
Sometimes not. Kiseki games aren't always Kiseki games. Or are they?
What is this?
What is this? I actually meant to put in a video on this, and I completely forgot to do it before we got here. So, Nayuta no Kiseki is an action RPG that Falcom developed right shortly after Ao no Kiseki came out.
Right here on the end.
Actually, you have it open in the tab.
I already closed the tabs out.
Oh, I know.
Sorry. So basically, Nayuta no Kiseki was an action RPG, and surprisingly enough, this was actually built on the engine of E7. On the other hand, Nayuta actually kind of plays a little more like a Sly game, where it's in stages and so forth. And it tells the story about a boy who's curious. His one goal is to sail around the world. And he is just obsessed with the world and everything. And one day he finds a magic door. And decides, I'm going to jump in this magic door. I don't know what's on the other side, but I want to see.
A good decision.
The best decision.
And so he jumps there and he finds a completely different world and ends up using this world and goes through this world to explore it and find its mysteries. It is a wonderful game. It's just probably one of Falcom's most gorgeous games, period. But what makes this game really unique is, one, Falcom developed it with the intention of making every boss to be equivalent of a final boss. Every single boss is heavily involved, like from one of them is almost like something out of Shadow of the Colossus, where you have to take down the legs and bring the boss down and climb on the boss and stab it in the back. There's another boss that's a couple of like robots on the platform, and they're constantly taking the head and putting it on themselves and punching the platform. Eventually, one of the bosses gets mad and flips the platform, and he goes tumbling with you on it while you have lasers everywhere. It is, they even came up with a boss fight that is basically one button. Just one button, and it's probably one of the coolest fights in the game. So, that's the concept of it. But what makes Nayuta no Kiseki truly unique is it's all done in stages, and each stage has what they call the seasonal change system. You can basically go through a stage, and eventually you come back to it at a higher level, and you can change it from like spring to autumn, and suddenly changes the entire environment. Let me go back to that. So, like you see, like on this one, I'm sorry the image is so small. The image on the left is a stage, like a platform with ice on the ground. You're slipping, you're sliding, it's hard to keep traction. On the right hand, the ice is melted and the land is dry, and now there's poison on the ground. And it changes the entire atmosphere of your platforming for the stage just because of everything. Yes?
Is this Oracle of Seasons?
What?
Is this like Oracle of Seasons?
I've never played Oracle of Seasons. I don't know.
I can see the comparison.
So,
Real quick.
Are there any plans for this to be localized?
At the moment, no localizer has issued any hints that they will localize this.
because it's only on PSP. Falcom never released it to anything else. What makes this game interesting also is this was Falcom's final PSP title.
Yeah, so it's after even things like Ao and
It came out. It actually came out the same year Memories of Celceta came out in Japan. So
Which is on the next platform, this is so sad.
yeah. So what makes Nayuta interesting is it is bright. It's colorful. There's an incredible soundtrack. It is probably the culmination of everything Falcom put together, but it has the Kiseki name on it. And so somebody finally asked Kondo about it, and he said, we want to portray this game as a story-heavy RPG, which it is. And he said that the Kiseki title is attributed to that because of the other games.
It's a little confusing.
It
It's
is
not-
very confusing.
It's not the last time. Falcom recently titled the game Tokyo Xanadu. It does not have anything to do with other Xanadu games.
It's actually also a little more like Zwei, I think. The way it plays.
That's true.
I mean,
And actually,
Nayuta
Nayuta
in
and
that it
yeah.
incorporates a lot of other references to other Falcon games and so there's a many going on.
Yep.
There's backstory behind why this game's like Spy, but we have to move on. That brings us to some of the figureheads of this company. On the left, we have Masayuki Kato, the original founder and current chairman of the company, I believe. In the middle, we have President Toshihiro Kondo. Explain how he's president, Luffy.
Kondo originally was hired originally applied to Falcom and to be in finance. And when he got hired, they straight up said, you don't have the face of someone in finance. And basically said, you're going to build our web pages. Because he actually, that's what he did on the side in clubs in college, was he built a fan site for White Witch. And it became actually a fairly famous fan site. And basically they were just like, you're going to build our websites for us. So that happens, and eventually over time, he ends up, because he starts gathering info on the games to be able to put the web pages for them, he eventually is like, well, how about this, or maybe this to the game? And basically, these were really good ideas that he was having, and eventually he got pulled into the design team. And from there, he became a director of the company, and from there, he became the company president. I think he was in his early 30s when he became president.
Falcom has an odd, very strict and rigorous recruitment process. So you have to go through multiple. You actually experienced some of that yourself, Luffy.
Yeah, I did. I went through the application process once. I went to apply for part of their graphic design team, and you have to have, they prefer fresh out of college. They will take experience, but another thing is Falcom is always hiring. They're always looking for new talent. But in order to, in the graphic design, I had to have my resume or my CV. I had to have the Rikeisho, the Japanese resume. I had to have a self-advertising letter to advertise, this is why I should be hired by you. And then I had to have a application packet of my own design of a video game cover, box, CD, and game manual. And basically you take all that, you get it all printed, and you ship it off to them. And that was the process to apply to be graphic design with Falcom.
The most recent recruits they've acquired were 5 within the last year or so. Normally they only take 1 or 2, maybe a year for the development team. They get a decent amount of applicants and not a lot of recruits. They stay small and they have a very kind of tight development environment. Everyone kind of helps work on another part of the game development process, even if they're credited for one thing and the credits scroll, which is different from how other developers and publishers, even self-publishers, might, delegate talents and responsibilities during the game. This means that some things written in the design document might not match what is finally made for the product. Falcom in the industry, I guess to sum it up, they have an odd place. They're respected, and they've kind of earned a reputation for quality, but they're also seen as kind of a niche end of, for example, the JRPG and action RPG development circle. You want to add to that, or?
Wait. Sorry, what?
We can move on.
Okay, okay.
Fun things about these, big holes.
Big holes.
That translation is now gone, but it was a fun site for anyone who played East 8 at launch. It became the subject of a meme. There's some history on that.
A good one.
on the right, it's hard to read. I'll say it right now. This is Hugo talking to a character. This is an East origin. He's talking to Epona. On top of that, your sense of style is severely lacking. Your trident is laughably cheap looking, and you seem overall unintelligent. He's like this in the entire story. He gets nicer later on, and he's still that snarky. Sometimes these games have edge.
Hugo's amazing. I love him.
Yeah. You should know about this.
I'd like to talk about this first one because, boy, their artist loves middle bangs. You can go to any freaking character in Cold Steel 3 and 4, and they're gonna have that damn middle bang. Let me tell you.
There's like one without it. It's like, what?
You won't be able to unsee it.
No, you
now that
never.
you said it, you'll never be able to unsee it, period.
I mean, you notice this in like a bunch of other games too, but it's prominently in 3 and 4.
Absolutely.
It's next.
This is Anton and Ricky on the left. You might recognize them if you've been paying attention to NPCs ever since Sky's FC. That's Cold. That's those them in Cold Steel, and the emoticons kind of summarize their personalities. Ricky on the left is he thinks a lot and he's just using to himself. Anton loves the world. He's on the right. He wants adventure. He gets himself into trouble.
And he wants to find a girl that never does.
He just wants love.
Yes, that.
Real briefly, those chess quotes, like the one right, introduced in FC, SC, and third, those are the XC was only able to put those in as little, bonus inserts because, yeah.
I actually know this. I was talking to Jess when she came up with this. Jess was so fed up with the problem with first chapter is they did not have a single string that said the chest is empty. Every single treasure chest had the item and had the chest is empty. Every single chest. So I remember Jess just randomly messaging me with, how many chests are there?
163.
There it is.
And
Sorry. That's how many there are in first chapter.
She apparently got so fed up with it, she just started putting snark in instead of empty chest lines. And eventually when Falcom was like, what is this? And she's like, marketing.
Kind of like in Cold Steel 2, the trial chest when you don't have a red party map.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the funny thing is that with second chapter, second chapter has them as well. They actually had to break them and make the strings work that way again because Falcom had fixed it by that point.
They fixed it for SC and third,
yeah.
but they did not fix it for Zero.
Yeah.
Zero has 230 of them.
Yeah,
by the way.
Zero, by the way, has this issue going on.
Yeah.
So, but they actually couldn't because Cold Steel would have required Falcom to actually do extra programming.
Yeah, they would have had to make a new box after every thing when there wasn't anything.
And
yet,
Falcom was like,
basically.
no. And so basically XC finally was like, okay, we'll just do the trial chests. So that was the concession for that.
I'm just going to plug Bandage 2. It's only on PC98. You probably will not be able to get it legally except for importing by Yahoo Japan. But I really wish it would come over here at some point. I can keep wishing. All these games have some relation to Eastern Trails. Literally at Tokyo Xanadu, that's the game you mentioned earlier. It's kind of misbranded like Nayuta and Kiseki, but it's pretty Kiseki. It's just set in modern times. If you had a spy, the Old Bar Insurrection, if you played it, awesome. Show it to everyone. Great game, fantastic, has some really surprising story twists. Xanadu next.
Eastern Trails plays Y2. Thank you.
Actually, I want to add, please play Spy 2 because Falcom has been very sad that was the game that bombed and why they had to quit the PC market.
Yep.
But do you want to?
Very dialogue.
Do you want to skip any of the music or?
Let's go to 0.
Okay, go to 0.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna skip a section because we're running short on time. So, but what did you say, Crossbell?
Look him up on YouTube.
Well, there's the music before that.
Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I'm the lead editor for the Trails from Zero fan localization, which we're just calling fan localization now because we're going all out with this project. So
that button was in English, yes.
Yes, exactly. Just a short recap. There are very literal translations out for the Crossbell games now, but there was a team before this that they got a translation, but they never got around to the editing process. And so, unfortunately, these translations, he was told to be overly literal, and so it just doesn't really translate well to English, and it doesn't really have the localization spice and personality that we're accustomed to. And so, Floofy and
full of inconsistency and
Yeah.
errors, but
Yes.
otherwise it's all right if you can deal with that.
yeah, Floofy and Guan picked up the project.
And you're talking.
And a few months later, I just offered to help edit, and lo and behold, here I am. And now we're currently sitting above like 77% on it. A lot of re-edits going on and fixing everything. But we are making this entirely English.
Yeah, I want to make another comment that the thing when Juan and I took over on this project, those of you who played Cold Steel 2 would probably understand this. Juan was like, "We're taking over that zero translation project of yours." A la Osborne. Yeah, the
he
Osborne
actually
film.
took an image and edited it. with-
Yeah, we have an
you know,
image of
that's-
Osborne saying that.
Let's go.
All right, so you ready, guys? We
Yeah,
actually
so
have
we're
a
gonna-
sample of the game in action.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's a video. It's not much of a video.
there we go.
So we're gonna first show off something that's brand new to this,
Yeah, you'll notice that
if it loads. There we go.
Yep. So yeah.
We're gonna shout out to Paul.
Dr. Cullen, PhD, and C Pancakes. We couldn't have done this without their graphics and video work.
This is their work.
We said we wanted to go all out, so we thought, heck, we might as well do the videos too.
hold on, wait until it shows.
Yeah. So you can see we have the title sequence in the beginning, that all animated in, and then should be right up here. There's another bit of graphics work.
And then there's the canon and stuff. After
Hold on, then we have the chorus again.
this, after this, no, find me.
Yeah, you got that?
That's right, I forgot about that.
Yeah, even though that's not what it says. It says it in Japanese.
Yeah, it had it in Japanese originally, so basically any text that came up in this before was all in Japanese, and we've got it now all in English.
And it looks great.
Yeah.
All right. You want to get to where you can load in the game?
You want to
Just
Because I can skip it.
yeah. I mean, it says developed in
Yeah.
yeah, and at the very end, it's developed by Falcom.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's not this.
Yeah.
So, there you go. By the way, I'm happy to see those in there too.
Oh,
And we have our.
And yeah, PC players, you probably know about turbo mode. So we now have that in Zero. Our programmer, Jose JL, he's a magician, and he's just tricking out this
By the
port.
way, another additional thing.
Hello, what is this? Maybe it was changing resolution.
So it's only required.
You want me
It's gonna be
to
gone.
close this cabinet?
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, close it down.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna reopen this real quick.
We have 1
We
minute
don't
left.
have the.
Right here.
We're basically out of time.
Yeah. All right.
Real quick.
So how can we follow the progress of this translation?
Yeah, so
Yes,
Geoprime.asteria.net.
Yeah.
That again is entirely new.
Yep. Okay.
Didn't catch what the site was.
It's Geofront, GEOFRONT .asteria, ESTERIOR.net.
And there's a lot of progress reports in there, and a bunch of screens, and other video progress that you can check out. Basically, a big thing, a part of this is giving the characters.
We made an internal new option system.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just
We're out of time.
you know,
Yeah.
like
We're out.
Yeah.
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah.
We're
So
almost
is
out
this
of time.
like a PSP emulator, or is this like a
This is
standalone?
the PC.
This is the PC version.
Except, yeah.
And you also get the best battle theme in the series.
Oh yeah, and you know everything's in English. Usual. Except you can't read anything you can except for the enemy stuff, that was good.
And this is the game that brought in the battle modifiers.
One last question. You.
In your opinion, what are
Volume down, please.
the
All right.
legal and developmental barriers that are preventing the Crossbell games from reaching the United States beyond just a translation?
What's the legal kind of barriers?
Yeah.
Here, you want to switch spots while I do this?
Yeah, do that.
I can get right in front of the mic then. Because I've been following this for a while. Here. Okay, so with the Crossbell games, the unfortunate thing is that they both came out on PSP originally. When Alan Kiseki was coming out in Japan, that's when we got first chapter, to give an idea. So it would make no sense at that point for the PSP titles. And by the time we got second chapter, that was, Falcom actually kept their PSP dev kits for second chapter and then sent them back afterwards. So any console work from Falcom has to actually use Falcom as the programmer. Oh, that's a water bottle.
Oh.
All right.
So the problem then we have Kara Annie and the Vita versions. Those were not touched by Falcom. And that brings in additional red tape. And then we have the PC ports that were made by a Chinese company. What did you do? Oh, you went to the debug menu.
That's fine.
We're working on things.
Yeah, and then you have the PC ports that were made by Joyoland, a developer in China. And so that brings in a whole other string of red tape, which especially now that it looks like Joyoland may not even be in business anymore.
Yikes.
This is the Kiseki right here.
It's, yeah, the Curse of Kiseki has been named by Xseed.
This too is Noroi.
Noroi.
We are out of time, unfortunately, but I feel like we had a really fun discussion about lots of things related to East Trails and Falcom abroad. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know it's a lot to expect for this late in the convention sometimes, but you all are still alive. You're still not asleep. You're still here for Falcom.
And feel free to come up and ask questions if you want,
Yeah.
because we'll be here.
Yeah, we'll be here for a little bit.